All right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your humble, gracious host, Richie Mars, and we are still in WrestleMonthia, building up some episodes to WrestleMania. And of course, he was a part of the last year's WrestleMonthia. Had to get him on for this WrestleMonthia. Mr. Scott Eisenberg from Shoot the Flick is with me here today. Scott, how are we doing today?
We have been doing better. If you can't tell from previous times, I have a cold, so my voice is deeper. Um, it's how these things go at times.
Would you say that you're feeling like death a little bit?
A little bit like death has come to try and claim me.
well, segue. We're talking about the Boneyard Match from WrestleMania 36 with Undertaker and AJ Styles. We're talking everything about that. Undertaker's wrapping up his career. This is his final match ever in history. And of course, AJ Styles is no slouch in this department either. Now, Scott, you texted me a bunch of options. I chose the Boneyard Match. Why did the Boneyard Match come to your mind?
So before rewatching this, I remembered it being a fun match, especially at the time we were dealing with stuff, COVID and everything, and WWE was trying to reinvent itself. So they're like, hey, we can do some fun things because we can't have an audience, and we'll try some fun, interesting, weird kind of matches. And so when I fell off WWE for a long time, um, actually what got me back into starting to rewatch wrestling was AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and Christopher Daniels in their triple threat match for TNA. And like from that point on, I've kind of always kept an interest in AJ and Samoa Joe especially. And it's like, oh, now we talked about Undertaker's one of the greatest of all time, and I'll always tune into a Taker match. But now you got AJ, who basically is like the second coming of Shawn Michaels, and the Undertaker. What could they do in a match?
Now, you said AJ Styles was one of the guys to help you get back into wrestling, into WWE, TNA, whatever was happening at that time and following his career. What about AJ Styles were very attractive, like in ring performer, personality wise to you?
It was just the reckless abandon that he would do things. Like, you just, when you watched him, like, Pele kick, jump off the rope into this, like, the punch, it's just all of everything he does in the ring, it seems so smooth, and it's just fun to watch. And, like, I think, like, WWE made the biggest mistake not having him and Joe fight while they were both at the company. Just do a little.
They did, but I think they waited a little bit too long.
But if you could have had them for like a title match, like at a pay per view, I feel like that would have been amazing.
They did have a
But
couple of WWE championship matches, but they weren't
oh god,
promoted as like this is the two of the best going at it. It was more story driven than it was here's the best, here's the other best. Let them go and fight. It was more of Joe playing mind games with AJ about his family than it was about them being phenomenal athletes, no pun intended.
wow, WWE does like to go that well a lot with family stuff, but it's another story.
Even with Undertaker, his brother,
With Undertaker, especially.
yeah.
Oh god, there was a whole thing because we'll get into it as we get into the Boneyard match. But AJ is honestly, he was just so fun to watch, and then pairing him with people like when they paired him with Kurt Angle and Tom Cole, like that whole crew. Then he would fight Christian Cage, and every match he seemed to do, he always seemed to outdo himself.
Yeah.
And it was just fun to watch. He does remind me so much of Shawn Michaels. It's kind of crazy.
It's almost like a modern day Shawn Michaels. I mean, granted, we're still in times where a lot of Shawn's moveset are still being used modern day, but remember, he only had to use one super kick to put somebody down, and now it seems like everybody is going to be doing a super kick in a wrestling match. And ironically, I don't think AJ Styles uses a super kick. He does the Pele, which
Yes.
makes him a little bit similar but different. It's kind of like Coke and Pepsi. They're both pretty similar, but one has like different kind of taste. Because I'm one of those people who can taste the difference between Coke and
I
Pepsi.
can too. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you like better?
I'm a Coke guy.
Oh, I'm a Pepsi guy. It's not
Darn.
because of Punk either. I want to stop right now. I like it because it's sweeter. I like sweeter drinks. All right. But transitioning a little bit, during this time, The Undertaker's career was, coming at its end. And uh, as a fan of The Undertaker, when did you think he should have hung it up?
I always thought WWE's plan, and I still think, was that it should have ended at a Mania. Like, it should have been, he loses at Mania, that's it.
Mhm.
Like, I think that's the ultimate passing of the torch to whoever beats him. And unfortunately, the guy that beat him, we're not going to talk about ever again. So,
So it's all for naught, kind of.
yeah, it's weird to like talk about that even now. Like, there's some moments like you go back to old manias now that we can't talk about anymore.
Well, let's talk about at least the. We don't need to talk about the guy who broke the streak. We could talk about pretty much that post streak broken era that the Undertaker was in. I believe the first one was the Wyatt match. Then he faced the guy who broke the streak a little bit.
Yeah,
Had a great Hell in a Cell match with him too. I think that was his last great match during this time, because then you had the Shane match with MMA Shane McMahon. Then you had, I believe he had the Saudi matches, like the infamous
yeah.
Goldberg one.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Super Showdown with Triple H. You had the Saudi match with DX and Brothers of Destruction, where Triple H tore his pec. Kane's mask fell off. Everything that went wrong in that match. It's also bald Shawn Michaels, and I acted like that SpongeBob scene in the movie where you're just like bald, 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 bald.
Oh, just because bringing up Michaels here, just
Yeah.
bald Michaels. Did you see the R-Truth clip?
Oh yeah, I did. Yes.
R-Truth, God, he's hysterical. Everything the man does is golden.
Oh. Well, we support R-Truth and everything that he does on this podcast. Don't get in trouble, Truth. Don't get in trouble. Stay you, please. But R-Truth aside, Undertaker, he had the match with John Cena that was 2 minutes. He had the unfortunate match with Roman Reigns where he had a bad hip and he just couldn't go. And it's hard when you watch somebody who looks so immortal and then you see them moving around like slower, not as crisp. And like that's what happened to me with Kurt Angle when he was in his final run with WWE. Like everything felt like it was like atrophying, like the muscles, and he wasn't as crisp as it used to be. And it's kind of like that Simpsons moment where it's like, look, Lise, you could see where his heart breaks in this one moment, and then you slow it down, and then you see the heart break. How was seeing Undertaker during this time for you?
Difficult. It's always difficult to see someone you grew up watching just kind of just not be that guy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
In anything, wrestling, sports. Like, I remember watching Derek Jeter at the end with the Yankees. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't the same player
Right.
that I grew up with. Like, it was just one of those things, like, you understand that the sport takes such a toll on these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, you almost just want to go and be like, Taker, you've done enough. Like, you've done enough. You don't have to keep doing this. Like, I want you to just enjoy your life, which now he seems to be doing now that he's finally actually stepped away from the ring.
Yeah.
But, like, you've given us all you can. Like, you don't have to keep coming out here. Like, we don't want to see you like we're cool with the occasional Taker comes out, does a fun little thing, choke slams Braun Breaker. We're good with that. Like the fun little things.
Yeah.
But we don't need to see you be like Hogan coming back every year, not looking the same. Like we don't need that from you. You've given this industry your entire life. It's just
It's
it's tough.
yeah, and it's like that chasing the dragon, you know that saying, where it's like you're constantly trying to be satisfied with that fairy tale ending that very, very, very few people seem to have in life, let alone wrestling. You know, I think the only one that I could think comes close to a wrestling sense is probably Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Even before like the WrestleMania 38 match, like he stayed retired for nearly 20 years, you know, until he came back. And with Undertaker, he said that it was more of a pride thing than a legacy thing because when he was facing Ric Flair at WrestleMania 18 and Ric Flair had that bout of unconfidence about him that he wasn't sure who he was as a performer. And after that Brock Lesnar match, you could kind of see the transition from before to after of Undertaker's confidence, like in ring performance wise. And it's just like watching Superman kind of like go down to kryptonite. And then after he went down to like doomsday and then he came back and then he like lost his confidence. What were your overall thoughts of the matches that Undertaker had during this time? Is there one that kind of stands out for good or for bad?
Like the match with him and like the that last Hell in the Cell match is it's really is like the last hurrah because everything after that kind of just seemed like we were going through the motions like we get the big entrance, him walking out, we get all that, but it just I don't know. None of them stand out because, and that's the sad part. None of them stand out. Like you remember the matches with Michaels. You
Mhm.
remember the streak being broken. Like you remember, like he has all these moments. You know, over the years. Like we don't talk about the Giant Gonzalez match. That's the one we don't talk about through those years. But besides that match, like every WrestleMania had an Undertaker moment,
Mhm.
and then those went away. They
So,
disappeared.
so with that, I think I have a pretty good analogy for the Undertaker's career. This might seem a little bit weird, but stay with me on it, Scott. You've known me
Okay,
many
I'm
you've known me many years. You know how out there my mind can get sometimes. Undertaker's career was the Harry Potter books. After the
okay.
streak got broken, it's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
That's it's actually not bad. That's a pretty good one.
You know, because it was like I believe J.K. Rowling was the creative consultant on it, but she didn't write it. You know, and it just felt like this portion of the Undertaker's career is what a ghostwriter would write on how to end the Undertaker's career.
It, it does in a way, but it feels like the person who can't let go.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, like I think if you took the Undertaker's career and you were actually gonna write an ending of like the career, I think anybody would have wrote it that it ends at Mania with the streak ending. If
Mm-hmm.
you were gonna just write the career, but I think once the streak was over, Taker couldn't let it go. He was the leader of the locker room. He was the last man standing. He even mentions it here at one point in because when we transition to this Boneyard match, he has a really good interview where he goes Triple H, Shawn Michaels, like all these he mentions all these legends names, Steve Austin, The Rock. He's like, I'm the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was pride that, like, as you said, pride before.
Hmm.
His pride wouldn't let him let go of being the Undertaker.
Hmm.
He didn't want to go back to being Mark Calloway.
Right. And let's transition a little bit more into the AJ Styles portion of his WWE career. I was a huge fan of AJ Styles, still am. And when he transitioned to WWE, it's almost like he didn't find his footing for a little bit until, the whole beat up John Cena thing. And then kept going, kept going, kept going. WWE championship reigns here, multiple championship reigns here. But for him, it's almost like his WrestleMania matches, I don't want to say were bad, but they underperformed in the eyes of the audience because when your nickname is the Phenomenal One, and anything less than that, that falls lower on the viewer's eyes, might seem like a disappointment. Like the Shane McMahon match, I remember being received really well. But again, nobody was really having high expectations because of Shane's ability. What were your thoughts on AJ Styles' WrestleMania matches at this time? And I'll name them out. Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 32, Shane McMahon at 33, Shinsuke at 34, and Randy at 35, which you were in the building for, too.
Yes, I was in the building for AJ Randy. I kind of want to talk about AJ as a whole in WWE
Yeah, go on.
because it kind of feels like WWE has this guy, like, and it just feels like they don't really truly know what to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had him with the club for so long with Gallows and Anderson, or the OC, sorry.
Branding, pal.
Yeah, sorry. And it just, this is part of my problem with WWE. Unless you're like in the major storyline, like right now with the Bloodline, it kind of feels like everybody else is kind of like, we're not quite sure. We're kind of moving things around, but we're not sure what to do with you. And I feel like they've never fully known what to do with AJ, which is sad because he is an amazing performer. He's not the best talker on the mic. He's good, not the best.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't know, it just feels like it's off. It just always has felt ever since that when he shows up at the Rumble, everyone went crazy. Like, we never fully got like, what do we do with this guy?
I think he hasn't reached the heights he did in WWE. Like, once that John Cena feud ended, I don't think he got back up to that level. And like, I think I have a couple of theories, because again, I don't run the company. AJ Styles, when he was hired, I think he was late 30s, early 40s, and when you're the WWE and you want to promote certain people, they tend to lean towards the younger side, which is smart in branding cases. Like, look at John Cena, look at Roman, look at Steve for a while. Steve originally retired. I think he was like, gosh, like 37, 38 when he retired
Yeah,
the first time.
around that, yeah.
And now that's kind of like when people are just starting to hit their prime in WWE. And I think with AJ Styles, he turned a lot of heads, kind of like when Punk did with his promos, showing that you could like capitalize on independent guys. And with AJ Styles, I don't think it's a lack of the company not trusting him. It's just that I think they value him more as a utility player, like that person that you could kind of plug in anywhere on the card. Like Dolph Ziggler was that for a long time when he was with the company. And sometimes they'll put you in a spot where you can succeed. And then if you're in that spot and you excel, you get rewarded for it. Look at Kofi when he was in that gauntlet match. So
Yeah.
they have these guys like a Shinsuke, like a Sami Zayn to a certain degree, like a Kevin Owens, that are very reliable guys. They're always going to be in the mix with stories. They're always going to be those reliable hands. It's all about whether creative is backing them up with that and whether it's to help which division and which person they want to work with.
It just, because we've talked about this off air, and I think we've talked about it on your show before. The talent in wrestling now is it a level I don't think it ever was, even in the Attitude Era.
It's going to be tough to top,
The talent now is ridiculous.
Mhm.
And it's just, you want all that talent to be used because you see the things with them, like, and it just feels like like, you do mention utility guys, but like, I would love to see matches that, like, AJ versus Kofi, I would love to see that as like a singles match for a title,
Mhm.
because I feel like that would be a great match. Like, Sammy versus AJ would also be a fun match. I feel like there's these matches that would be very fun to watch, and I feel like sometimes WWE, because they get so bogged down in like the over dramatics of a story, that sometimes they don't realize that, hey, we can put up fun matches, still have a good time. Like, I always want to point out, like, there's a YouTube series called Gore and Perkins.
I like Gordon Perkins.
I do too. They're hysterical.
They're so. Didn't Chad Gable like go into space or something in one
He
of the
did.
episodes?
Chad Gable went to space. Chad Gable went on a run, like, with titles, like, and it's just they're so fun, but like, they do things like, even if they outcomes happen they don't expect, they have to change the story a little bit. Like, hypothetically, like, oh, Kurt Angle's the number one contender to Chad Gable's title, but then Kurt Angle gets pinned by Sami Zayn, so Sami Zayn gets inserted in the match. Like,
Right. Yeah.
things you don't expect to happen change the story, and I feel like WWE doesn't. They see a line and, like, no, we're going on that line. We don't deviate at
Yeah. We
all.
don't veer off the path. Like a lot of people were saying probably the biggest example is the whole Rock Cody thing, which again you could listen to the archives about the whole Cody Rock debate. I'm not going to get into it here. it's a little bit too long. But whatever your side you're on, I support it either way, as long as you're not toxic or whatever. But when you have all these guys who are uber talented, it's just by proxy. There's not going to be enough spots at the top of the card. There's not going to be a lot of spots at the upper card. There's not going to be a lot of spots in the middle of the card or the open, and with that being said, you got to make the spot your own spot. It's kind of like a movie in some set, tying it into Shoot the Flicks, which you could download on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. You will have movies that will have, cameos, short parts that are super memorable. Look at Pulp Fiction with Christopher Walken. One of the most quotable, like recognizable scenes in a movie and in history. But that scene is only for about 2 to 3 minutes out of a 90-minute movie. So it's all about making the spot your own. We were talking about Truth earlier. He made the whole Judgment Day thing gold. Something as silly as pretending he's in the Judgment Day. And now he's made it into another run for himself. And that's what a lot of these talents do. And with AJ, he's in an interesting position where they keep giving him opportunities. But now, since he's in that older style, now he's getting into that era where I think he could still have one giant run in him. It's just a matter of if they give him the opportunity and if the opportunity is there for him.
Well, eventually, someone's got to topple Roman.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Cody, which all signs that it's going to be Cody.
Don't
but
jinx
we said that
it
last
here,
year.
Please. Don't.
We said
jinx
that
it,
last
please.
year.
Oh boy, I can't. I can't go another year of it.
But like, I think like after whenever they do decide to pull the trigger and have Roman not be the champion,
Yeah.
I think he's earned a good couple months to just chill out.
Yeah, just go run an island, just kind of chill.
go do some movies, to go do whatever you want, man. Like,
Oh, by the time this comes out, the new 2K game comes out. Do you want to know the story? Have you heard about the story of the new 2K game?
no, I haven't.
So, My Rise is the career mode for 2K. We veered off topic, but it's fine. It's my
It's
podcast,
fine.
so
We come back eventually.
we come back eventually. So, for the men's career mode, it's called the Undisputed. So, the main story is that
Baby.
Roman Reigns got tired of beating Cody Rhodes, so he went off to Hollywood and vacated the championship. And then it gets better. Your character is entered in a one night tournament to determine that champion. You're in the finals against Cody Rhodes. Roman Reigns interferes, attacks Cody Rhodes, makes you the champion, and it would just wait, and is not acknowledging you as champion, and that you're the tenant champion and he's the landlord. Actual lines in the dialogue, by the way.
Okay. Oh God.
I will say it's different from starting from the ground up and then the story ending right as you become champion. Now you start the story as champion.
Okay, sure. God, wrestling games. That's a whole nother story. Wrestling games.
Yeah, we're gonna
I feel
do
like
a
there hasn't
future
been.
podcast on wrestling games. I would love to have you on.
Oh God, I feel like there hasn't been a good wrestling game since SmackDown versus Raw, like 2010. Um. Oh God.
But anyway, we're getting back on track here with the Boneyard match.
Yes.
And initially, this feud started in Saudi Arabia in a gauntlet match for the. It was it was some cup. It was some like cup they were fighting
Yeah. Who cares? It's Saudi.
for. Boy. But originally, Rey Mysterio was in the gauntlet match, but the OC was shown to have beaten up Rey Mysterio, and then AJ wants to win by forfeit, but we see the Good Brothers knocked out backstage, and we see that familiar trench coat boot combo, and the Undertaker pins AJ Styles. Now, do you think this was a hot way to start off the feud, or do you think it was kind of because I'm always mixed when a feud starts with like one person pinning the other in like kind of a weird way like this.
Um, it's a good way to start a feud, just because I think depending how that person does it, I feel like AJ did a good job, like voicing his opinion and like what he took it and ran with it.
Mhm.
Actually, it's very funny because this feud reminds me so much of DDP saying "Make me famous."
Oh boy.
They literally in Undertaker's little speech, like right before WrestleMania, like he has an interview, and he literally goes at the end of it, "I'll make you famous." I'm like, they know they're referencing that, right? They're referencing one of the most insane storylines. Undertaker's wife, make you famous. Like, all these things were in that DDP one initially.
Well, thankfully AJ Styles came out a little bit better than the whole DDP feud.
Oh yeah.
And in the interim with this Undertaker feud and choosing AJ to be the next challenger, and AJ's been trying to behind the scenes get Undertaker to be one of his last opponents. Did you think AJ Styles was the right person for this, or did you think somebody at the roster at the time, whether it's an old veteran or a newer superstar, could have used the match a little bit more?
I think AJ was the right guy at the moment because I think with the way you look at it, the mystique of Taker isn't really what it once was. It wasn't like this was meant, to pass a torch. Technically, Taker has already done that.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're just looking for a highlight moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we really want here, is we want that last big moment for Taker, and we need someone who can do a moment like that.
Get like that attraction out there for WrestleMania.
Yes. This was more for Taker.
Mhm.
than it was for anybody else.
So we have this feud getting started underway, and Taker would help he would help Aleister Black against AJ Styles and the Good Brothers. And I was actually really excited with the prospect of kind of like Undertaker passing the darkness torch to Aleister Black. And unfortunately, WWE didn't really capitalize on it. And
Well,
AEW's
WWE
not really
yeah.
capitalizing on it. And I'm so frustrated because the Black Mass is one of the best moves in
Oh yeah.
wrestling. And he's just not being used to his full potential, and it makes me sad.
Well,
But what
they
did you
missed the boat twice with Taker doing that with Bray and then with Aleister Black. Like, you had two opportunities.
you had two, like, it was like right there in front of you and you did nothing. But I think it goes back to like Vince being so protective over the Undertaker character. Like, we've heard stories that he wasn't into like the big evil or American badass version because he was so in love with the dead man version of the Undertaker. And let's kind of go into that because AJ Styles started going through his promos. This is when we're transitioning into that pandemic performance center era of WWE. And he started talking about Undertaker as Mark Calloway, which is his real name, and starts referencing his wife, Michelle McCool, his children, all that stuff. This was an interesting route to go because it's not like we've seen this in an Undertaker story in quite a while since that Stalker angle with DDP. Now, what did you think about this turn for the story?
Um, I think it's actually a great turn for AJ to like kind of taunt Taker in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, this is the end of Taker, so it's kind of like removing the mystique a little bit. But it's funny because this is not the first time AJ's been involved in a weird family storyline. Do we talk about the pregnancy in TNA?
Ah, why'd you have to remind me of Clara Lynch? Why'd you do this to me?
It's
Like, not.
just funny to me. It's like we come full circle with family stuff with AJ. With family stuff, WWE really should avoid family stuff because it always seems to be a mess.
I feel like wrestling should avoid being family stuff because remember in TNA, AJ Styles got married to Karen Angle, now
Yeah.
Karen Jarrett. Then the whole Samoa Joe thing where Samoa Joe's
Uh-huh.
saying daddy's home and breaks into AJ's house or was about to. And then I actually thought that was a pretty fun cutoff when Joe just goes daddy's home. And then the screen just goes to black. I was just like, I didn't know we were watching a horror movie. AJ should
Oh,
stop like just doing family stuff
he really
in
should.
WWE.
Oh god.
But yeah, it was a pretty interesting turn to kind of like you said, kind of like peel the mask a little bit, peel like
But
drape the curtains a little bit.
but the only issue I have with this build in general is AJ never seemed to get one over on Taker.
Okay.
Taker seemed to always kind of fully be in control. Even in the when the match starts, Taker seems to almost be completely in control.
Yeah. I
So
see that concern, yeah.
so like the only thing like I would have wanted, because he does go like AJ's doing a really good job selling like, I want the real Taker. I want the dead man. I'm like, yeah, but you keep getting your ass kicked by this shell of a man that you keep saying. Like, so what would you do if you had the real Taker? Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, if
Yeah.
AJ's getting the better of him at like most of this feud,
Mhm.
then you can kind of be like, okay, now we get this at the end.
Mhm.
It would make more sense.
Yeah, I think it was more of, and I'm trying to like see like where they were thinking of it with the build. And I think it was more of, since AJ is a smaller guy compared to Undertaker, obviously, they kind of wanted to do like the head game thing. So even though he was getting outmatched physically, they were showing kind of that AJ was getting the upper hand mentally. Because if you remember, they were having like a press conference, I believe, for the match. and Undertaker, which is kind of comically like silly because the rampway to the performance center like makeshift ring was like so short, and then you had like the Undertaker's music playing, that slow music, but it's like he's like power walking to the ring, like chases everybody off, flips the table over, and then it cuts the commercial. So I think they were trying to play AJ as this guy who's breaking the no rule and referencing the Undertaker's family, which no one has really done since he was the dead man persona. And really, let's be honest, because that whole feud with the whole DDP thing, that was almost 20 years ago. So no
Oh
one was
yeah.
really like referencing like Undertaker, Michelle McCool as his wife, everything like that.
Well,
So
yeah,
it
she wasn't even
was,
his wife then.
yeah, and it was like a whole like interesting dichotomy that when somebody like imagines Undertaker versus AJ Styles, the build that we got isn't the one that we would put to our minds right away, but they made it work.
Well, yeah, because they definitely did not want this to be a cinematic match. They wanted this to be a match,
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's funny because you can tell, like, the first week they went to the performance center. It's just a interesting thing. AJ is talking and he pauses like he's waiting for a crowd reaction during one of his. I'm like, and he's like, "Oh wait, there's no crowd." He goes back into the speech. Like it's just a little pause, but you're like, "Oh wait, there was supposed to be a thing here."
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes. Oh. But yeah, the performance center era was definitely interesting. Did that impact how you watched wrestling?
A little bit because it just wrestling as a whole it's meant to be. It's a show. You want the energy of the crowd because you can tell, like, the wrestlers feed off that.
Mm-hmm.
Heels, faces, like even when they're getting booed, you can tell they're making hand gestures at the crowd. Like they feed off that, and you could tell that they felt off.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why, like I think as soon as they could, all the wrestling, TNA, WWE, AEW, like they put like the plastic things around the ring
Yeah.
to like let the wrestlers stand on the side of the like in the crowd, kind of.
Right. Could kind of make an audience. Yeah.
Just so the wrestlers in their minds could kind of fake it.
Yeah. Just kind of feed off some sort of energy that wasn't there previously. And now that we're kind of getting there and we're getting more into the cinematic era, we had more backstage promos. We had more promos of just people talking to the camera, which I thought was sorely lacking at that time. Because this was like the era where everyone was staring at the monitor like from the side, and like who watches the TV like that. And this is where we had the Undertaker's deep voice, and then transition into the more Mark Calloway voice, the normal voice. And once that happened, and I got excited for American Badass Undertaker, with Undertaker name dropping AJ Styles as Alan Jones. You
Yeah.
know, what do you think about like this whole like fourth wall breaking in wrestling? Do you think it's a cheap way to kind of gain interest in the story, or do you think when used right that it can be effective?
Most of the time, it's cheap.
Mhm.
Well, it's cheap heat most of the time.
Mhm.
But when done right, in certain circumstances, it does make it feel more real. There's a reason that everyone always brings up the pipe bomb. And now, ever since that moment, Punk's been chasing that ever since then.
Yeah, that's become the encompass of CM Punk's gimmick and personality in wrestling.
So, when done right, yeah, it does add a little bit. It does give that little push of like, oh, this is more real. This is more intense. Like, we're no longer in the story. We are now more serious.
Mhm.
And like, again, because this is like Taker's like transition out of the sport, it's kind of like, okay, cool, we can drop the gimmick and let him transition out. Like, and let him be who he wants to be, since he has given his life to the sport. Like, it feels different. Like, he earned this. He earned becoming Mark Calloway versus The Undertaker. Like, no one ever calls Kane Glenn Jacobs.
Well,
Like,
they call Mayor that, but
yeah,
other
that's
than
true.
that,
But like, it just like it's weird. Like, it's almost like you have to earn your real name back.
it's kind of like hanging up the gloves, like putting the boots in the center of the ring, but in a performance aspect of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And again, it's one of those things. Like, it, we've said it all this time. Like, Taker has wrestled everything that he could do for wrestling. He has done it all. He has gone along with the Ministry of Darkness gimmick. He crucified Stone Cold Steve Austin. He hung Big Boss Man. He's held every title in the sport.
I like how you just group all that together. All these accomplishments, all these championships, crucified a man, hung another man. Like all of them are equal to each other. Wrestling's weird.
It is. And it's especially weird when you talk about a guy who was a zombie for a little bit.
So let's transition into the name the Boneyard Match. Now, a lot of older fans, they saw the casket match, they saw the buried alive match, and obviously brain goes to, why don't they call it a buried alive match? Well, that's because I feel like WWE at the time with their current product don't want to really advertise someone being buried alive.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what did you think of the name Boneyard Match? Because I actually thought it was kind of cool.
It, it it's okay. It's a little dopey. It's a little fun. It's kind of like a weird, like, transition. Like, I feel like AJ was having a hard time trying to sell it at times. Like, that's a boneyard match. I'm like, AJ, it doesn't feel right you saying
Well,
this
it seems
for
like
some reason.
when they were advertising it, I'm not even sure they knew what a boneyard match is. Nobody
Oh, they
knew,
had no clue.
because usually when it's like the same thing with the Firefly Funhouse match. It's like, what does that entail? You don't
Yeah.
know, and when you're cutting promos on something that you don't know about, it's going to be very, very confusing on how to sell it.
Well, yeah, but that's always when you invent like a new match. It's like, what do we do with this? Like,
But it also gives you like kind of like a blank canvas. You can do kind of whatever you want during it. And let's kind of like dive into this boneyard match. And I have to say, I do like how Undertaker described his like final match appearance, where it's like part Undertaker, part American Badass, and part Mark Calloway, and that was the formation of this character. It almost got me to thinking, like, man, I kind of wanted to prefer this Undertaker after the streak got broken, and kind of have him kind of like run roughshod in WWE with a kind of like a different style and attitude. Do you think this version of Undertaker could have worked in WWE post streak ending, or at any point in WWE?
well, yeah, this is a little more of the like tuned down American Badass, because the American Badass was a heel.
Mm-hmm.
He was a heel character.
Yeah.
So this is the more like baby face version of that character. So could it have worked? Of course it could have. Especially after the streak, if you have like Taker come out and be a little more like he does, like, the mystique's over, it's done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the streak's over. I'm no longer the dead man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just the Undertaker.
Uh,
Like,
yeah, it's not. It wouldn't be as jarring as when Okada lost the IWGP Championship, where he dyed his hair red and then started playing with red balloons all the time, and came out in just like jogger pants. So I
yeah.
think the audience in WWE would have actually would be more receptive to it. But again, the guy who was running the place at the time liked Undertaker for only one thing and one thing only, and I don't think we would have even gotten this version if this boneyard match wasn't taking place.
No, I think this was again. This was Taker decided this. Like Taker's like I'm deciding how I go out, basically.
Well, we're talking about how he went out. Let's talk about how our competitors come into this Boneyard match with the Undertaker's symphony, graveyard symphony music playing, and then you have two druids bring a casket out, and then casket pops open, and it's AJ Styles. He does the sit up, and he's laughing, and he's just waiting for what's going on, and he's lurking around, and he's like, this ain't so scary. What's going on? And then you hear Metallica. I believe the song is "Now That We're Dead." I
Yes,
believe,
I believe so.
and you hear that the motorcycle's running, and Metallica's playing, and Undertaker hops off the motorcycle, and I'm looking at it, I'm just like, son of a gun, like this should have been what Undertaker was gonna be for a I'm like, I'm so frustrated that we didn't get this version for like a longer period of time. But I guess that's like kind of the magic of this last match of the Undertaker, kind of like the greatest hits, if you will, of Undertaker.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the greatest hits of Taker. Like, like again, are they kind of limited because it's not in a ring? Yeah, they're a little limited to throwing punches, to like
You're not going to
hitting.
see a Styles clash on the ground.
No, and you're not gonna see a Styles clash on the Undertaker.
Yeah.
That's just like it. Like Taker is at this point in his career, he's not taking anything huge,
Hmm.
but like I think the biggest thing he takes in this match is the shovel to the back.
Yeah. And AJ's tackling him through like a fence wall.
Oh yeah, that's basically it. Like as much as I love like hardcore matches, they do get limited by like what you can do in the backstage area without hurting people.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it's really hard when you make real items look like they don't hurt, but they do hurt, so you kind of have to lay it in there. And I think one of my favorite lines in the Boneyard match was AJ did something and he said, it's like, oh, you broke my finger. And he's just like yelling and just like, apparently that was kind of improvised, like the whole trash talking thing. And I felt like it added more to the fight scene. Like, you can believe like these guys do not like each other because that's what you do when people are fighting. You know, you are gonna have people who are trash talking. If they were insulting your family, your wife, your children, anything like that. How did you think the trash talking and worked to its advantage or disadvantage in this match?
I think the trash talking worked really well. Um, I think it's a lot of fun having like Taker just talk and be like, what would you say? Like, what are you sorry about? And he's just punching him in the face. Like, you're right. It again adds to the realism of this. And like when you know it's over, like AJ's like, don't bury me, don't bury me. Like that stuff is like fun, but like it also is a little weird because it's like AJ. He comes off. He does come off a bit weak in this match,
Mhm.
and that's the kind of the thing I have with this feud in general. Like, as much as you want this to be like a big send off for Taker, I feel like AJ and the OC all come off very weak in this match.
They were just kind of being fed to the Undertaker just to kind of have this last match.
Yeah,
And let's
you
talk
know,
about the Boneyard match, but before or the Boneyard setting. But before we get to that, let's go a little bit deeper dive into how AJ and the Good Brothers were being portrayed, and what were your overall thoughts of it? Obviously, we both think it could have been a lot better.
yeah. The Good Brothers kind of came off like bumbling sidekicks. It, um, it's funny, but they I don't want to say they're this bad, but it kind of gave me like Mean Street Posse feels.
Oh, jeez. Now I want a team called the Good Brother Posse.
Oh God. I just now I want to see Luke Gallows in a sweater vest.
Can you imagine a mashup theme of the Main Street Posse and the Good Brothers theme?
Oh God, it's so bad,
Uh,
so bad.
but I want it now. Thanks for putting that in my mind.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
If any fan can draw Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson in sweater vest.
Oh God, that's gonna be the mascot of this channel, and I'm gonna be sad about it.
Oh God. But they really are. They kind of are like bumbling sidekicks. Like when they go to give like the contract to Taker, like Carl Anderson does the scared, like put it in the ring, to then the lights go off, turn around, Taker beats him up. Like they get a couple shots in on Taker, and then like Taker throws Gallows off the roof, and then tombstones Anderson, and then it's done. It's over.
And the best part of it is, like, I guess not best, but it's like it's kind of funny now that everything kind of worked out the way it did. This was the last appearance for Gallows and Anderson when they did like the COVID cuts. So the canon was that Undertaker basically killed them off.
Just killed them off.
just killed them off. I was just like,
God.
oh man, what a way to go out, though. But it's a pretty cool moment for all those guys involved to be involved in Undertaker's last match. And
oh yeah, I think for all three of them, as much as that, like we want them to look better in the match, to be like AJ even talks about it like in an interview I think later on where he's like, where they're like, oh AJ, what's your WrestleMania moment? And he's like, well, it's the Boneyard match with the Undertaker. I'm the Undertaker's last match. It's like he's like excited to talk about it, and it's like I'm glad, even though you didn't come out the strongest, you seem to have a good time with it. Though there are shots in here where I'm like, guys, you're doing like a movie set thing. Like there's a shot where I can't even remember where it is in the match, but you could see the back of a tombstone. And it's like the cutout in the wood, so you can see it's a prop.
Oh, I didn't see that. I gotta go watch that back.
And I'm like, oh, guys, come on.
Give them credit.
You're filming this.
I give them credit. They did build this. I think they built it in like just like under a week or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't look bad. It looks pretty good. It's just like sometimes it's just funny. I'm like you like this isn't a live show. Like you're just airing this. Like you guys can literally. Like, oh shoot, we can see the back of this tombstone. It looks like a Hollywood prop. Let's turn the camera a little bit and take it again.
I will say, like, the Boneyard place they picked in general, I thought looked really good for what the ambiance and what they were trying to at least like portray on television. It looks a hell of a lot better than any of the CW sets that I see on the CW. But what were your overall thoughts, Tombstone aside, of the Boneyard setting?
It looked good. It did look good. And for basically being thrown together, this whole match being thrown together in whatever 2-3 weeks, like they threw the idea out and then made a set, like it looks good. Like if you had told me like, yeah, this was kind of actually a cemetery, we just built it up a little more, I wouldn't be shocked by that.
Now let's talk about some of the other famous moments of this match, and one of them is a great meme that was made out of this match, and that is AJ Styles terrified, and then you see the Undertaker right behind him, face glowed, bright light. Did you think that was the perfect amount of silliness, or do you think that was a little bit too over the top for you?
Oh, it was perfect. I was actually having an argument with myself earlier when I was rewatching the match. I was like, what's better, that or the Keith Lee one with or
when he's like the Loch Ness Monster and you just see Keith Lee just
and he pops up behind the Adam Cole and you're like, what did we do? Like it's just so good. Like it's honestly the perfect thing for like the dead man. Like because we've had the American Badass basically this whole thing, and like now we get the magic, like the last like little magic out of the dead man, and you're like, it's fun. It's a good time. Again, a lot of people who don't understand wrestling are always like, "Oh, this is goofy. This is silly." That's the point. It's like it's meant to be goofy. It's meant to be silly. It's meant to be shut your brain off and just enjoy it for a bit. Like just to you get lost a little bit in the story. Like it, it's basically a soap opera. If you
Yeah.
go back long enough and you're like, oh yeah, Undertaker, accidentally set fire to his house, killed his parents, and he has a burnt brother, and it's a weird storyline. But you're like,
It's a lot of twists and turns, and a lot of things don't make sense, or like they try to make sense, but then it ends up getting worse. It's supposed to be very enjoyable, and that's exactly what this Boneyard match is to me personally. It's just very enjoyable. Another aspect that I did like that they did in the cinematic match was the music behind it. It's not just nature sounds of people fighting outside that you would usually see in like a wrestling backstage like attack or anything like that. They actually like scored it. They actually just kind of had their own music and own vibe to it. Did you notice the music during the match? And if
oh,
so, did you have like a favorite like music sting or anything like that?
I don't know if I have a favorite sting, but I felt like it added to it. And that's the thing. Like when we talk about movies, like on Shoot the Flick, we always say like you have to do things that add to the scene or to like the overall like if you have a song that makes you feel things even if you don't realize it like and it just kind of fits into the scene, that's the best song. It adds but doesn't do too much. Like, you don't want it to do too much. You just wanted to add just enough to be like, oh, now I'm more immersed in it. And I feel like they did that very well. And it's funny, like the cinematic matches we had at this time. You have this. You have the Firefly Funhouse, the Hardy Compound. I don't actually like. It's always interesting because those are the like top three of them of like the cinematic matches, and they're similar, but they're also very different.
Yeah. I definitely get what you mean. Like this one was just kind of like more of a fight, if you like it's like those movies where it's like I'm gonna meet you after school, be here, and then and then it's like you get your buddies to kind of like gang up, and then you have like well, your buddies aren't druids, but that's what happened in this match. Like a bunch of druids popped out. Undertaker had to like fight off like 20 some odd druids that Gallows and
That
Anderson suck
yeah,
on.
that all fell down in like a punch.
Yeah. Well, it's the way of the druid. It's the way of the
Yeah.
extra. Now, are there any favorite parts that you had in this match that were really just standout moments to you?
AJ getting slammed off the roof.
Ooh, yeah, that was a brutal one.
That one was pretty brutal. Uh, like the whole thing with AJ laughing on the excavator he's about to like that whole thing is hysterical. Like he's like laughing like ha 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 ha, ha. And, like then the Taker appearing behind him and you're like that's great too. Like they had just enough little moments that were like added to things like. And even though like I complained that like the begging at the end makes AJ look weak, it's still at that point is like it works. It makes sense with the match we have had.
Mhm. And it's campy, it's campy. It's not. It's like a fun way to kind of close the book on Undertaker's career, and it's a fun way to give AJ arguably his best WrestleMania match.
Exactly. You know, it's just it's goofy. It's fun. It's the whole match like is just like it's just good. It's a good time. And you just even though like again, can we nitpick stuff? Sure we can. We've watched enough wrestling where we're like, "Oh, this could have been better. This could have been better." But that's not what wrestling really should be. It should be like you get a little lost in the story and you kind of just have fun with it. And that's what they did here. And at a time where the world was in utter chaos.
Mm-hmm.
We needed a little fun. So I think WWE supplied that here.
Well, one of my favorite moments of the Boneyard match was the ending where apparently the grave that AJ Styles dug for the Undertaker. He didn't read the tombstone, and it actually showed his name, AJ Styles, on it. So that's a little faux pas on AJ. But it's all fun. It's all fun. And then the ending shot where AJ's like hand is like under
Yes.
the dirt, paying tribute to the Revenge of it's either Revenge of Taker or Buried Alive. I might have been Buried Alive.
I think it's buried alive, yeah.
Yeah, it's Buried Alive, where Undertaker's hand is outside of the, like with the grave, and
Yeah.
the commentator like, "Oh, he's alive." And Undertaker finding his bandana, like riding off into the sunset. And again, like you said, even though you said it was kind of silly with AJ saying, "Oh, don't bury me," I like the Undertaker. It's like, "Come on, man, you fought your ass off. You fought your ass off." Like, he's giving him a hug, and then he like turns around and then big boots AJ into the grave. Like
Yeah.
it's like the perfect mini movie of just wrestling. And what if you want to show someone who doesn't know what wrestling is, I would definitely recommend this match just because it's the perfect amount of campiness, silliness, but also it's like there's a lot of things that look brutal, like the Undertaker taking the nail or the spike, just putting his hand through the windshield. Perfect amount of trash talk,
Yeah.
and like again, there are a lot of solid shots in here, and it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Again, him dragging AJ to the grave, like all these things are just they're good moments. They really did well planning this out to give Taker his nice little strong little push to be like, cool, go enjoy your life with Michelle McCool. You don't have to keep coming back and destroying your body.
And it's also apropos that the Undertaker's last match is the first WrestleMania that it's being split into two nights. So now there's a night one and there's a night two. Now, do you consider, since this was the last match at WrestleMania night one, do you consider this the main event of WrestleMania 36 or one of?
No, no, because it's the main event's the one and the second night. It always is.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's the last match of this night. Like when you go back to like old WrestleManias, like I think it was WrestleMania 2 where they had it at 3 different stadiums.
Yeah.
And it's like Hogan versus Bundy and like all like no, it's like there's 3 main event. I'm like no, there's one main event.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's the last match of the night. It's the main event of the night. You can have huge matches. Like again, the Mania I did go to, which again was a lot of fun. Becky, Charlotte, and Ronda Rousey put on a hell of a match. But at that point, everyone was exhausted because of Kofi Mania. Like we were all like the energy had left the building at that point. And I'm like, I feel bad because they're putting on a good main event match. It's just we're all exhausted.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I could see the argument both sides. You know, WrestleMania Night 1, WrestleMania Night 2. And I think as the years go on, there's going to be a distinction between both of them because as of now, I think WrestleMania Night 1 probably is the better quote unquote match of the two nights. Uh, but again, that's not to disparage, like, you know, WrestleMania Night 2. There's a lot of matches there that are like super quality comparatively, and to have the first night of these two night WrestleManias end with the Undertaker and AJ Styles, technically giving, you know, AJ that WrestleMania main event, and probably again it's probably going to be his biggest marquee match in his career, like you were saying. It's a pretty cool way to not only celebrate the Undertaker but celebrate AJ Styles as the performer that he is, even though it's not his wheelhouse being in a cinematic match. Like he's not doing 450s or phenomenal forearms or Pele kicks.
No.
He's in a style that people don't really associate with him, and I think it really just showed how flexible he can be under different circumstances like this one right here.
Yeah, exactly. It does make AJ, again, a guy that you should consider for a lot more than just a filling guy for things. Like, again, Dolph is a great wrestler.
Mhm.
It just, they never let Dolph do it, and now you feel like AJ and Sammy are like kind of in the same boat with what Dolph was before he left.
Mhm.
And is now in TNA. It's so tough. It really is.
Mhm.
And that's kind of why you talk about the brand split, and what you want from it is so you can have these different guys get these moments. But like, I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't feel like it ever gets that way. No matter what WWE does with that, they always seem to like, oh, Roman's on both shows, or like,
Like no matter how much they separate, it always seems to come back, and then separate, come back. It's going to be repetition, but hopefully with this like new regime, we'll have a little bit more uh, organization among that. But again, that remains to be seen. Now with the Boneyard Match, since on Shoot the Flick and your letterbox, which I follow at Shoot the Flick on Instagram, you give movies out of 5 stars, shows movies out of 5 stars. Wrestling, of course, has a 5-star scale, but again, it's subjective. Do you think the 5-star rating should apply to cinematic matches like this, or do you think there should be a whole different rating system for cinematic matches?
I think the 5-star rating can apply to it. Because I think the thing about the Dave Meltzer and his 5-star rating is sometimes I feel like it's a little weird, because like the match can be great and only get 4 stars.
Mhm.
And you're like, wow, that's an amazing match. How did that only get 4 stars? And I feel like a cinematic match is a bit more about the story than the match.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like you can tell it, but it's different a way to rate it. Like, is the story good? Like, the match doesn't necessarily, like, again, none of us would say this is Taker or AJ Styles' best match of their careers. Nobody would say that. But does it tell a decent enough story? Yes. So you could rate it on 5 stars on just the story element of it.
What would you give it?
I'd probably say at probably a 4.
I agree.
I think the story's well done. I think everybody does a good job telling their story. And I also give it props because, again, a lot of this is on the fly because COVID basically just took over the world.
And also
This
the
wasn't
pacing of it, too.
exactly the pacing. This wasn't like 4 or 5 months into COVID and you kind of like, okay, we're kind of figuring it out already. This is like 3 weeks after the world shut down.
Right, yeah, which is super impressive.
So you're like, cool, that's, that gives you bonus points in my mind. And that's a thing I think a lot of people tend to try and like avoid, is like, oh, the moment shouldn't affect the rating of something. No, the moment affects everything. Because again, if this match came out today, we would think about it a lot differently if it happened 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So you're like, you gotta let it. Everything affects it, but I think it does a good enough job to be enjoyable. And at the end of the day, that's what you want in the wrestling. You want to come enjoy yourself, get away from everything for a little while, and watch Cody Rhodes beat Roman Reigns at WrestleMania.
Can you stop making these predictions on my show? Because then I'm gonna get in trouble because you're saying a result, and then if it don't happen, then either you're not gonna get the heat for it. I'm gonna get the heat for it.
Hey man, I'm just giving you some cheap heat, man. Just
Oh gosh. Alrighty. Let's see how this is. Oh, just wait till I get on your show, Buster. Wait till I go on my rant about the Ric Flair impersonator at the Iron Claw.
Oh god, that fucking it's so bad. That was like the worst thing about that movie.
I still haven't
Frankie,
seen it.
oh God, it's so bad. The movie's great. The movie honestly is really good. I'm literally sitting next to my wife Frankie as we're watching the movie, and the impersonator comes on, and I start laughing hysterically in the middle of the movie theater, and Frankie's looking at me going like she doesn't get it because she doesn't get it, and I'm laughing so hard because it's so bad. I'm like, the one person you figure there's two people in wrestling or three people that if you can do an impersonation of, they're really easy. It's Hulk Hogan, it's Ric Flair, and it's Macho Man. They are like the easiest impressions to do. And to mess it up that badly.
Oh boy. Anywho, I can't wait to go over that with you, my friend. But however, we're wrapping up the Boneyard match right now. Scott, what was your favorite part of the Boneyard match, and do you have any least favorite parts of the Boneyard match?
My least favorite part is Gallows' little scream at the when he gets thrown off the roof. He's like, "Oh!"
He had one moment and he took it.
He took it. Yes. I honestly say my favorite is Taker appearing up behind AJ is probably the best moment of the entire match.
Yeah,
there's a reason it's memed.
It's a really good meme shot. I can't think of anything like that I thought was like bad. Like there's a lot of little moments I like where like AJ like threw the dirt in Taker's eyes to get an advantage. I like that a lot. The whole like druid like army thing was a bit silly, but again, it was kind of supposed to be silly, so I can't really say that was the worst. But if I had to pick something, it'd probably be that, because then you could see like some of the druids wearing sneakers in some shots, and I'm just like, oh, these druids are fashionable. They're wearing Jordans right now.
Oh God.
All right, Scott, we're about to wrap up here. Thank you so much for joining me for WrestleMonthia. Please plug your stuff. Plug what's going to happen on Shoot the Flick. What's going on in that world?
So me and my wife do a movie podcast every Wednesday, where we take turns introducing each other to movies. Very recently, my wife showed me Grease 2.
So
oh
sorry.
God. Yeah. I showed her the Mummy. So see how these things change? I get Grease 2, she gets the Mummy.
She got the better end of that deal.
Yeah, she definitely got the better end of that deal. But we take turns introducing each other to movies that we've missed, and sometimes we go back, revisit things we've both seen in the past. Like we did a revisit of The Notebook and a revisit of like Titanic and things like that. Things I've seen in the past that I'm like, I really don't want to watch these again.
Titanic
She's like, come on.
Titanic's a horrible movie.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's terrible.
I'm so glad that you're on my side with this, because no one else is.
No one else is for me either. I have this conversation every time I say Titanic is a terrible movie. They're like, oh, it's a classic love story. I'm like, no, it's not a classic love story. It's selfish. So bad. It is terrible. Like, he could have fit on the door, and it was scientifically proven that he could fit on the door. Mythbusters proved it, and it's just not a good love story.
No, it's not.
It's terrible.
It's so bad. Oh God. It's also really hard to rewatch. Like it's like we watched it. I'm like, this is hard. Like I can't. This is so long.
Yeah, it's like 3 hours, and somebody went to me. It's like, oh, why don't you watch it? I'm just like, I know what happens. The iceberg hits the boat, and that's what happens. Like that. Why do I need to watch 3 hours to watch that happen? It's like, oh, you gotta. It's an experience. It's a journey. I'm like, the journey is ice, boat, boom, split, sunk to the bottom of the ocean. The end. God.
It's so bad. That's again. We did a whole episode on that where I talk about how Titanic ruined Christmas for me one year. God.
I'm crying.
But yes, me and my wife, again, we are Shoot the Flick every Wednesday. Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and wherever you can find podcasts.
Okay. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. I gotta collect myself a little bit. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. You can follow us at Twitter at Retold Richie. I always thought it was at Retold Richie Mars, but apparently it's just at Retold Richie, and I made the thing, so this is on me. And you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Retold Richie Mars. Thank you all for joining us. TTFN, ta-ta for now. See you later.
And tell us if you hate Titanic.